going to use this rubbing alcohol bottle to make a
post-apocalyptic
junkyard robot. So stick around. 1 minute. Welcome to Busted Robot. I'm Eric. This is the channel where I make busts of robots.
Wait a minute. Out of clay.
Scrap building.
Scratch building.
Kit bashing.
Scratch bashing.
Trash bashing.
Yeah. Okay.
So the first thing I want to do is cut out this midsection so that I can get the head shape that I want. Next, I'm going to cut a piece of scrap foam to super glue the two halves together. Then to fill in all the gaps, I'll use this foam clay, which is pretty much like sculpting with wet bubblegum. Once it's all dry, the gaps are filled in and we're ready to work on a mouthpiece. And here I'm using some glass gems that my son gave me. I thought they'd make nice little robot teeth. For the eyes, I have some designs I printed out on our inkjet printer that I'm slicing up and gonna glue in with super glue into these 2-liter bottle caps. I'm using a 2-part epoxy clay called Magic Sculpt. You mix the 2 parts of it together and then you've got about 3 hours to work with it. This is my first time using this stuff, but when it's done, it hardens almost like a firm plastic. Once it's mixed, it's pretty easy to work with using normal sculpting tools and techniques. And it smooths out really nicely with just plain water and a fingertip. Now I'm making some robot headphones out of cat litter lids and 4-pack tops. And then gluing them using super glue and a little bit of baking soda. The baking soda makes for a stronger, faster bond and also has the nice side effect of adding some grit to the connections I'm making, which will come in handy later on. Now we just need some antenna, which I'm going to make out of this old soap dispenser pump. And I'm going to use the innards of that pump to also make the other antenna here. And then there was this cool little rubber gasket inside the soap dispenser that I thought would make a nice little detail on his forehead. I don't know what these little metal pieces are, but I've got a whole bunch of them, so why not? Now I'm making some rivets out of these tiny little beads that have been proliferating all over our house lately. I'm not sure what these little plastic pieces are, but I just thought they looked pretty cool on his face there. And the cat litter caps that I used are a little too big for his head, so I'm going to fill in those gaps with a little bit of leftover epoxy clay. No one's ever going to see the back of this head anyway, but I decided to guss it up with a couple of 2-liter bottle caps. I also want to add just a little bit of sizzle to the front of these headphones, so I'm going to cut some more craft foam and glue that into place. And one of the best tools to keep your fingers from sticking with super glue is milk jug plastic. I don't know why, it just doesn't stick very well to super glue. For his headphone antenna, I want the one on this side to be nice and clean and the one on this side to be all broken up and damaged. So I'm going to cut up some craft foam and use that to shape the outer shell of the damaged antenna. With that all done, he's ready to be sanded and prepped for priming. For the primer, I'm first using a mix of Coscom Flex Bond and Folk Art Matte White. The Coscom gets mixed with water, so it's very thin. I used the ratio they suggested, but it still went on a lot thinner than I would have expected. But it helps seal the foam. It takes probably 3 or 4 coats, plus this is another few coats of gesso. One cool thing I discovered is that a steel pipe thread fits perfectly in the opening of a rubbing alcohol bottle. Alright, now I'm going to use this crackle paste. This is my first time using this, but I'm hoping it's going to give a lot of good texture to his surface. Get some cracks and stuff showing through. It goes on like cake batter, but once it's dry, it looks pretty cool. Now I just need to sand it down to blend it with the surface a little bit better and make sure it's ready for painting. For the base coat, I'm using Vallejo Ochre Brown. I'm told that this will make the subsequent coats of yellow go on a little bit smoother with fewer coats required. And then I'm also hitting the teeth and a few other points with black because I plan on making those metal, and metallic paints tend to do better over a black base coat. Now I'm using Noosh with a combination of brown and black paints to dirty him up a little bit. Noosh is sort of like an oil wash, but it's acrylic based and just a little easier to clean up. I slather it on pretty thick here and let it dry for about 5 minutes before going back with a damp sponge and a damp finger and just kind of wiping away until I've got the look that I'm going for. Then I go in with a paintbrush with some gunmetal gray mixed with brown just to distress the edges and add a little damage to them. You know the part in the Bob Ross video where he's got a perfectly good painting and then for no good reason he smears Van Dyke brown across it? And you're just like, why, Bob? Why do that? This is that moment. I thought it would be cool to paint like a purple drippy cloud on his head because I wanted it to look like he's been graffitied and painted on by street toughs over the years. But it just ends up being the first of several cataclysmic mistakes in this paint job. If it wasn't obvious, this is my first time painting graffiti on anything, or really doing any kind of like super detailed hand painting like this. It's not even that detailed. Ugh. After struggling with my subpar brush handling skills for a while, I decided to switch over to a Posca pen to do the edge work. Posca pens are an acrylic-based marker, so I thought they would be perfect for this scenario, and that actually doesn't look too bad. Now just another quick wash to dirty them up a little bit, and this is bad. The wash medium ended up smearing the Posca pen, leaving him just a blurry, awful looking mess. I did want him to look kind of weathered and beaten down, but he looks like an actual piece of garbage. I thought maybe painting the metallic portions of him would help draw the eye away from the worst parts of his paint job, but no. He looks so awful that if you get close enough to your screen, you might actually be able to smell the funk of a few half-crushed cans of PBR, a soaked paper plate smeared with nacho cheese, and the faint whiff of my wilted enthusiasm for this sculpture. So yeah, just a simple undo. I didn't literally lose a whole night's sleep over it. One thing I did decide while curled up in the fetal position on the floor of the shower was that I wanted to add a little extra detail to his headphones here. So I'm going to use this little leather punch to pop out a few holes from this craft foam. And with the help of my handy bedazzler pen and some super glue, we'll attach them to the metal bands here. With that taken care of, he's ready for another round of paint. Just adding a splash of yellow here to separate the headphones a bit. Then some metallic paint touch-ups before a little bit of dental work. Take 2 on the graffiti, this time using an oil-based marker, which will hopefully hold up to the wash a little bit better.
Like and subscribe, yo.
Here I'm just practicing a little bit on a sheet of paper, thinking maybe that might help me avoid ruining the sculpture again. And now he's ready for one last round of weathering. Here I'm making up
A weathering goo.
made of gesso and weld bond. And then I'm adding some baking soda and a little bit of playground sand to that before mixing in some brown and black paint that I will dab onto any little parts here where I want to have a little extra texture for rust. Then I'll go in with some brown paint using a sponge and a paintbrush to just fill in some areas where I want it to look like the paint's chipping off. And then I'll go in with some metallic paint to hit some areas where I want it to look like it's gone all the way down to the bare metal. While we're waiting for that to dry, I'm going to use this Florida orange juice lid to make a collar for him. And using some of my leftover
Weathering goo.
just dabbing that on really thick and then covering it in brown paint, dabbing it with some red and then yellow to give it a nice rusty look. And while I've got that red out, I'll go hit a few spots on his headphones, and then he's ready for another wash. Casually slitting his throat here so I can get him ready to be attached to his plinth. And then cutting a piece of cork to cram into his throat. Dry brushing a little piece of plastic conduit to make his neck. And then using some old guitar strings and some electrical wire for the damaged antenna. Now I think what he really needs is a barbed wire necklace made out of armature wire. Once I'm done building the barbed wire, I'll cover it in some of my black tinted
Weathering goo.
and then follow that up with some brown and yellow paint. Now it's time for the dirty down rust layer. So this is going to take that base rust paint job that I did and kick it up to a whole new level. It is also chemically engineered to give you a migraine headache, so I highly recommend a respirator and a well-ventilated area if you use this stuff. All right, now we're going to get him ready for display, taking that rusty collar that we made for him and attaching that to the plinth, and then we'll attach his head and neck, wrap his barbed wire and guitar string necklace around him, and he'll be good to go.
All right.
We're done. Here he is. He's finished. Not too bad. Could be better. Some things I like, some things I don't. What did we learn? We learned that foam clay is the absolute worst, and that it probably wasn't even necessary in this sculpture. I think that I could have just filled all the gaps in with the crackle medium and been just fine. Graffiti is not for novices. Probably should have done a little more practice before I started just scrawling all over him. I learned that Posca pens do not get along well with noosh. Yeah, goofing up the graffiti and starting over. Well, I mean, that's a positive lesson, right? Sometimes you do just have to say, you know what, this isn't working. I'm going to start over. We did lose some detail on the crackle. A lot of the cracks got filled in, but, you know,
It's okay.
maybe a little crackle goes a long way. It'll get better from here.
It's only gonna get better.
Definitely stick around because we're going to have some glamour shots of this guy. And while we watch that, we're going to listen to my favorite
Swedish post-hardcore band.
Fireside. And if you think you don't like Swedish post-hardcore, that's just because you've never heard Fireside. They're really something special. So are you. Thanks for being my friend. Love you.
Reflection of myself, and when everything crashes, she comes to me. It won't happen again. It ain't no love scene that makes my teeth grind. 2 million voices and just one mind. It ain't no love scene that makes my teeth grind. 2 million voices and just one mind.